Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome to the Books That Make You show. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy, and today we're talking about books that make you, as a young adult, desperately try to figure out how to get out of that maze. Our guest today is James Dashner, the author of the #1 New York Times bestselling Maze Runner series. He is also the author of bestselling Mortality Doctrine series. And in 2014, there was a film adaptation of The Maze Runner released, followed by another 2 films in 2015 and 2018. Collectively, the 3 films grossed an estimated $449 million. That's a nice chunk of change right there. And
it was actually, I thought it was 949 million.
Oh, what did I say?
You said 400.
Oh, sorry. A little bit of dyslexia kicking in there. Yes.
No, that's okay.
It is.
Yeah, we almost hit $1 billion, which was exciting.
That's amazing.
We'll have to do a re-release so we can hit $1 billion.
Exactly right. Just change it up a little bit. New release. Yeah. But yeah, and this has been, I believe, the 4th highest ranking grossing film series that's based on young adult books. Of course, there's Harry Potter in there, there's Twilight in there, and the Hunger Games, and then we have Mr. Dashner's The Maze Runner. A little bit really quick before we bring you in. You were born and raised in Georgia. You now live and write in the Rocky Mountains with your wife. Got 4 kids, and you got a horror novel that we're going to be talking about too, The House of Tongues, which was apparently inspired by stories in your family, which were about a run-in with a serial killer. Oh. I really want to get into that. But James, it's so wonderful to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me, and it's always fun to talk about the books and the movies. And yeah, I'm honored to be here with you.
Excellent. Let's start with that big question, because I feel young adult fiction, especially the young adult fiction of your era, if we can say, because at that time it seemed like millennials who were reading the books, we all go through this as young adults, right? It feels literally like we're in this maze. We don't know where to go. We don't know where our life is going to take us. Can you talk a little bit about just this idea of young adult fiction and the theme of being in a maze that the Maze Runner series has a certain basis in?
Yeah, sure. My first thought for the series was I was going to bed one night, and I just, for some reason, pictured this giant maze, made out of stone with ivy growing on it, kind of like an old castle or something. So that was the very first glimmer of an idea, was just this picture that popped in my mind. And the next few days I was just brainstorming, coming up with the general story and the characters. So, but it did hit me pretty early on that probably the most obvious metaphorical thing that we've ever seen in literature is a maze. You go back to Greek mythology and all this stuff with the Minotaur. And so it was kind of fun to combine just the metaphorical type stuff with just a good old fashioned, adventure, mystery, intrigue. I really wanted the characters to be people that people could emulate and empathize with. And but yeah, it's been asked to me many times. Almost every time I do an event or something, it is brought up how metaphorical a maze is and how it applies so much to a teenager's life. Not knowing what's around the corner, being scared of the dark corners, trying to get out, trying to escape. So it's been fun to utilize that.
How do you feel that your audience, the people who grew up with this series, do you think about how it might have actually shaped or informed their lives?
Well, yeah, that's definitely been the most rewarding thing. I recently did an event in Italy, and this, the first Maze Runner book came out in 2009. So, it seems like yesterday to me, but it's been 15 years now. So my wife and I really noticed at this event how many people said the words, "I grew up with your books." It was kind of the first time that I really noticed so many people saying that, it's old enough that, totally grown up adults now can say, "I grew up with these books." So that's just kind of a funny side note that we've started noticing that. And it's also fun to see new people come to the series. But yeah, I've had a lot of people tell me that, it had this big impact in their lives. That's always the most rewarding thing. Just, I'll get letters or people tell me in person that they were going through a hard time with their parents or their families or school or being bullied or, even thoughts of suicide, things like that. And just they were able to connect with these characters in the maze and kind of apply it to their own lives and find strength and courage to get through what they were going through. And of course, I never really pictured this while writing the book. I just was trying to make a cool story and, lots of fun and lots of intrigue. But that has by far been the most rewarding thing, rewarding result of it is just hearing stories like that. It's been really fun.
Oh, I can imagine. And like you mentioned in the beginning, you hit on something I feel that's just universal in storytelling, that idea of the maze. And I think it was Theseus, right? That got caught in the maze in Greece, in ancient, is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Right.
If we're wrong, just,
We're close. We're close.
We're stressed out. Yeah, that does sound right.
I think it was Minos, and it's been a little while since I've read all that mythology. Yeah. But then you were, like you just mentioned, that you were in Italy, so you've been doing tours and you've been doing different events there. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I think you went there with your wife. That must have been amazing.
Yeah, that's been another really fun result of all this writing, especially. The movies, of course, just take a series to a whole nother level, where I think before the movie came out in 2014, we'd been translated into maybe 20 languages, and I had done a couple of international tours. But since the movies, our languages are up to almost 50, and we've just been really blessed to be able to go everywhere from Argentina to Mexico to all over Europe. We've been to Australia, Japan. It's just been absolutely just an amazing journey to meet people from different cultures and regions of the world and see. I think part of it is what you're saying about a maze. It kind of transcends language. It's probably a legendary metaphorical storytelling device in almost every language and culture. So I think that's been a part of it, of why it's been such a big hit worldwide.
Yeah. And you mentioned the characters too, being able to identify with those characters and, being able to see yourself in that situation. I think that's why ultimately we read books and we read fiction, is because we can transpose ourselves into that character situation and we're trying to figure things out. Can you talk a little bit about how you develop your characters? Are you pulling from real people? Are you pulling from archetypes? What's your methodology there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I definitely think that the characters in a book or in a movie or TV show or theater, play, musical, whatever, I think that the characters are by far the most important element, hands down. And it's just because, you can come up with the coolest premise, the coolest world building. You can think of a really cool, plot twist or story of suspense. Just, you can think of all these things, but if the person reading or watching doesn't connect with the characters, then it's just empty and pointless. Because, I used to joke that if your character is being chased by a monster or something and is about to be killed, the worst thing you want the reader to think in their head is, I don't even like this guy. I don't care if he's killed. And so you want characters that people can connect to. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're just these good. You don't want good, perfect, no flaws characters. You want them to be flawed and to have problems and to feel real. And I feel like I learned that, at least in my early years, from reading Stephen King, who's my favorite author of all time. I just feel like no matter, sometimes his stories would just go beyond bizarre or wacky or just the weirdest thing, that popped in his head. But his characters were so masterful and just so real, and their senses of humor felt real, and their reactions and dialogue felt real, that you just enjoyed being there and being in these characters' heads. You didn't really care what the story was or where it went. And so I've always tried to follow that, that plan or that goal to make my characters feel real. And as to how I do it, man, that's such a hard question. I kind of come up with the characters and I think of a few things, all right, this guy's going to be really serious and somber. And, we're going to have to figure out why he's like that. Or this guy's goofy, kind of crazy, wild sense of humor. Why is he like that? And I just let my brain, I rely a lot on just instinct and inspiration as to what they'll say, depending on what their 2 or 3 main character traits are. And a lot of it, I just follow my instinct, I guess.
And it sounds like that in many ways is a lot like what Stephen King does as well. He's always said he's essentially a pantser, and there's so many plotters out there. You have both camps. Yeah. So it sounds like you're more of a pantser. It kind of comes together without you necessarily putting things down and outlining.
I was always a pantser. My editor for the Maze Runner books did help me at least kind of come to a middle ground where I would write maybe a 2 or 3 page, just very general outline of a book to at least start with a path. And that did help me a lot, because a lot of times when I love the word pantser, and I love that that, just going by the seat of my pants, often I'd have to go back and just make huge corrections and realize I'd wandered off the path and gotten into the weeds and need to go back and stuff. And so at least planning a little bit has helped me. But I still would say 90% of what I write comes to me while my fingers are moving, while I'm typing. It's just how my creative process works. And I just trust my instincts and go with it.
Do your characters talk to you? Do you have conversations with them?
I've heard that a lot. They definitely feel real to me. And they talk to me in the sense that, I had a friend who taught me this, and it kind of stuck in my head, is when you write that your characters say something, really stupid, easy example would be like, man, today is really boring, like, why are we just sitting around doing this? Your character's basically yelling at you, hey, dude, you have put us into a very boring situation. You need to go back and change some things. Or, sometimes you'll have a character say, man, this just doesn't make any sense. It's just, why is this happening? And, maybe your character's trying to tell you that you need to set that scene up a little better, or that mystery or that plot twist. So in that way, I guess they do talk to me.
I love that. And I love to, the Maze Runner, yes, it's young adult, and we've really leaned into that. And as you mentioned in the beginning, it's components of so many different things. It's fantasy, it's sci-fi, and it is horror. It's horrific. There's those elements there. So I can see that Stephen King influence. And then moving on from that, you've written a horror novel, adult horror novel. This is for older folks. Can we segue and talk about your horror novel?
Absolutely. I'm very excited about that right now, because I actually adapted it into a screenplay, which is, I'd written a short screenplay I actually adapted a Stephen King short story from Nightmares and Dreamscapes. And that was a really fun process. It's just like a 12-minute short that is starting to go out to film festivals and such. But I really wanted to write a full-length screenplay. So I chose my book, The House of Tongues. And so just to give you a little background on that book, it's this story that's always been in our family. And, you know, people probably aren't surprised that I'm kind of obsessed with serial killers since I like Stephen King and all that kind of stuff. But in the little town that my mom grew up in South Carolina, there was an actual bona fide serial killer who his name was Pee Wee Gaskins, which is the most horrific serial killer name I've ever heard. And most time when you go buy those books, you know, I mean, you know, like most prolific serial killers in history, or, you know, these books that are fun to thumb through in the bookstore, he's usually in there, and he might have killed up to 100 people. It's really not sure, but he did get caught and was actually electrocuted in the electric chair. But yeah, it was in this tiny town. He committed several of the murders, and my mom and all her siblings would talk about it. One time my Uncle Jeff took us on a drive and showed us where they had found some of the bodies, which sounds really morbid. But I decided I wanted to write something different and something that was sort of autobiographical, because there's a lot of stuff in there about when I was a child going to visit grandma and all these things. And then a lot of stuff about present day, because the book has 2 timelines. And the present day guy has 4 kids, which I have 4 kids. And he keeps flashing back to when he was a child, basically in this town that I remember, you know, visiting as a child. So there's some autobiographical stuff. And then, of course, it's very, very, very loosely based on this real serial killer, Pee Wee Gaskins. So, yeah, it's called The House of Tongues, and it's just a thriller, horror, scary novel that I'm really proud of. And like I said, I wrote the screenplay, and we're very close to seeing that come to fruition in terms of being made into a movie.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really pumped about it.
Yeah. Okay. I do want to ask you about the difference between writing a novel and writing a screenplay or a teleplay. But first, we'll put that out there as a teaser. I want to hang with this horror novel just a little bit longer, especially as readers. That's what we love. We crave something that's based on reality. I mean, if you want to look at a genre that's just on fire right now, it's true crime, right? Mm-hmm. There's something that's even more so compelling about it when it's real or inspired, in your case, by somebody who is real. I don't know. Can we dig into the psyche of people? What are your thoughts?
Yeah,
do you think about?
It's funny how, you know, I have a big extended family, lots of friends and stuff, just such a wide variety of people. And just, it's funny, the true crime stuff, you know, like once a week or every other week, Netflix will come out with some new true crime documentary that shoots to #1. And I'll see everyone from, you know, sweet old ladies to, you know, musical teenagers who you just think aren't into that sort of thing. Just every single person I know seems like at some point they've mentioned, oh man, did you catch that latest documentary on Netflix or Hulu or whatever? I think, and I know for myself, which is no secret whatsoever that I'm interested in that sort of thing. There's just something about the human, you know, what humans are capable of, you know, the same race, the same species as us that we just live our everyday lives are capable of committing such evil, heinous things. It's like our way of peeking into the dark room that's forbidden to go into, you know, because just out of curiosity and fascination, and we can see that sort of stuff without, you know, having to delve into it ourselves or become evil ourselves, or God forbid, get involved in some kind of horrible, evil thing. it's just really weird. And, you know, I used to kind of be embarrassed that I was into that sort of thing, but now I realize that almost every person I know is just fascinated by it. And it's just part of human nature, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm laughing, but I'm also like you're kind of giving me shivers because it's so true, James.
Yeah.
The little old ladies down the street are into true crime. They're into this darkness, you know, moms, teenagers. It is that universality.
Yeah.
And then, like you just said, knowing that you've got others that are interested too, it's almost like it gives permission. It's okay to be curious. It's okay to want to explore the real dark underbelly of the human condition and what we're capable of. And I think that's exciting and terrifying all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like what's hidden, you know, within every human that, you know, who knows what might bring that out in you. It's just a fascination studying that and reading about it. And it seems pretty universal.
Yeah, it is. And I think, again, when you can hit those universal notes, when you tap into something that's part of the human condition, no matter how old you are, how much money you have, what country you're from, religion, etc., you've struck some gold there. So, and I think that's part of the magic of your writing. You strike gold because you're keying into that. And now, if you don't mind, can we move over and talk just a little bit about the difference between writing a novel and a screenplay? Like, how did that feel going from one to the other?
Yeah, that was, you know, basically my whole career. People would ask me at events and stuff, you know, what do you want to do next? Or, you know, what's your goals? And I've always said from the very beginning, one day I want to get into screenwriting, just because I am a huge movie buff and just love that medium, I guess. But I didn't really pull the trigger until recently. I think I was intimidated by it. But my agent and my film agent really encouraged me to take a stab at it. And it's actually, if anything, I feel like it might be more up my alley than writing a book, because it's so streamlined. You know, it's the bare bones, the basics. You're just giving very brief details about the scene and the character's background. And then, of course, it's heavy on dialogue. And you can really just shape the story in a more streamlined fashion. Like, for example, the House of Tongues book, you know, is 300 pages or 300 something pages, whereas the screenplay is just 100 pages. And it has a lot more white space, so it's far fewer words. So, of course, in some ways that would seem easier, but also, of course, it's a much bigger challenge to get the same story across in such, you know, so many fewer words. But I really enjoyed it, and I definitely have caught the bug and think I will, you know, my goal is to this year write just a completely original screenplay and see what I can do with that. And so it's different, but a lot of the things are the same in terms of, you know, focusing on character and focusing on a solid story and plot line. But it is a very different experience. I would say I like both pretty equally.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. A lot of times, that's the thing about being a writer, right? We can write lots of different formats. And from, I think, a novel to a screenplay is probably the most diametrically opposed because of the points that you're making. It's just streamlined. It's the essence of story. It's boiling it down to just the core. I'm curious, James, while writing, whether it be screenplays or novels, the process itself, and you've been doing this for many years, but what have you discovered about yourself as a human being? Is there any revelations or any thoughts or things that you've discovered about James Dashner while you were writing?
Yeah, great question. I think I've discovered, I've definitely discovered in terms of my writing process that I like to just go through and write a first draft without any kind of looking back or editing or making any changes, and just letting the creative process roll until I have a complete first draft. And then I worry about going back and editing and changing things and making it better. And I think that has actually taught me a lot about myself. It's kind of how I am in life. I don't like to, beat around the bush and pick at things. I don't like, my worst times are when I'm just worrying about, I guess a better example of what I'm talking about is when I go on tour, or, when I went to the movie sets and stuff. At first I would get so caught up in worrying about everything I said and making sure it's right, and, trying to be on all the time and stuff. And to me, that just really reminded me of trying to write a book where you go back, you write a chapter, and then you spend like weeks and weeks trying to make that chapter perfect and just reworking it and reworking it. I think that's just a terrible way to go about it in my own writing process, because it really deadens your creative role and process. And so I've tried to adapt that just to my normal life and say, what, just go to the movie set, be yourself, don't worry about every little thing you say. And, I'm just very self-conscious, and I don't know, thinking about it in terms of my writing process helped me be a little better at just moving forward and not always looking back or looking sideways or trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong in the moment.
A lot of writers are terrified of speaking in public. They envision it, right? That's the goal. They want to sit at the desk and sign copious amounts of their books and hand them to people and speak about their book. But then when they're actually there on stage, it's terrifying because writers can tend to be introverts. But it sounds like you've used actually your writing process to help you in those situations.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I think mostly I've thought on a subconscious level, but talking about it now just makes me realize that I had to make a conscious effort to change and be more like that process, or I was just going to go crazy and, die of anxiety with all these events and stuff. And I would say that it's definitely hard. I get nervous before every single event and all that, but I feel like I'm much better at it and much more relaxed, and have able to just stop worrying so much about what people think about every word I'm saying and all that kind of stuff. Something everyone has to go through in, whatever phase of life they're doing or working on.
And it just goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. We're all humans. We're all in this maze of life together.
Yeah.
And sometimes if we give each other a little bit of permission to just be human, don't worry about being perfect. You have that idea of always being on, or always being perfect.
Yeah, I think
you don't have to.
One of the biggest challenges that humans face, especially growing up and teenagers, and especially in the age of social media and stuff, I think it's a real challenge that we need to figure out and help people with.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that goes back to your demographic, the millennials who grew up with your books, with social media, and just with, it was such a unique generation.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm curious, with all of this said, is there any advice, any sage tips or things that you might want to bestow to other writers, somebody who's thinking about writing their own books or their own series?
Sure, yeah. By far, it's not even close. The thing that has helped me the most is attending writers' conferences, joining writers' groups, and everywhere. These things, they seem like something maybe that's hard to find, but everywhere I've been, there's just like once a month, there'll be some random group holding some kind of writers' conference. And a lot of times they can get editors in there to speak and answer questions or meet with people. But even more important than that is you just meet other people who are like you, other people who are writing and want to be writers. And luckily, I got involved with that very, very early on in my career and made some really good friends who also went on to have success. And just, rooting for each other and leaning on each other and meeting for lunches and writing groups and going to these conferences, I feel like is by far the single most important factor that led to me getting published and the success I've had. So I would look for those things. writers groups or writers conferences. They're much more frequent than you think.
Excellent advice. And nowadays with the internet and social media, there's things you can do even online. We do BookFest, and there's, like you said, just go look, search. You can find writers conferences in your area. I couldn't agree more with you on that, James. Great advice. Okay. How about your details? Where can people go to find out more about you, find your books, follow you on social media?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. My website is just my name. So it's jamesdashner.com. And I have most social media. Luckily, I have an unusual name. So basically any social media, it's either James Dashner, or on Instagram, it's actually Dashner James. So, Facebook, X, Twitter, Instagram, whatever else there is. I don't really do TikTok because I'm terrified of it, but my agent keeps telling me I need to. So maybe. I don't know about the TikTok thing. I just feel way too uncool for TikTok. But yeah, a start is just jamesdashner.com. And my books are in most bookstores, and anywhere you can buy books.
Perfect. James Dashner, author of the Maze Runner series. The most recent title is the Maze Cutter. Mm-hmm. More books are coming out. Also, author of the horror novel. Oh, where is it in my notes?
The House of Tongues.
The House of Tongues. Yes.
Very creepy title. Yeah,
I love that. I was torn, James. I wasn't sure if I should draw that book or the Maze Cutter, because I draw the book cover, and you have.
Oh, you drew that. Wow, that is fantastic.
Something that kind of looks like a cutter.
I was wondering where that came from. It was like a foreign cover or something that I hadn't seen yet. You drew that. That is really nice.
Chalkboard. This is the advantage of having a chalkboard.
Well, now I look at it closer, it makes more sense. That is fantastic. I love it. If you could send me a picture of that, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Oh, sure. No problem. We can do that. Again, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your writing journey and about your process and your books. Love it all. Thank you so much, James.
Oh, yeah. You're very welcome. It was an honor. Thank you.
You bet. And thank you, everybody, for being here as well. You can find out more about us on our website. That's booksthatmakeyou.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are on TikTok, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, James. But until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please do me one favor and enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.